Blonde. Netflix dropped this back end of September. We didn't get a chance to talk about it yet, but this is the highly lauded, highly anticipated biopic of Marilyn Monroe, starring Anna de Armas, that received, I believe she received like a 9-10 minute standing ovation at whatever the film festival was, Cannes, I think.
Yeah,
This
I think so.
premiered. Um, but I think that, similar to Amsterdam, critically getting panned in a lot of places. And so I was curious because to me, this felt almost like a movie that couldn't miss in a way. Anna de Armas, we are big fans of Anna de Armas here. Um,
Mm.
I was like, this is going to be a great look for her. It's going to be interesting to be going through this history. Obviously, there's going to be some difficult moments, but man, I left and I just was like, I feel like this movie was really missing something, and it kind of just left this like bitter taste in my mouth. While I think it was still really well done, like I just didn't enjoy the movie watching experience. It was very brutal. What about you?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's well done. It's well made
Yeah,
for sure. And Blonde actually premiered at Venice, not
Venice.
Cannes, so a little more recent. Um, yeah, I mean, there was so much anticipation for this, right? Because Marilyn Monroe, to this day, you know, gosh, how many years after her death? 50 years? 60 years
Yeah,
after her death? 60 something years after her death,
almost
almost?
60.
Yeah. Still a huge place in our culture, like, iconography, just a big piece of Americana. And to see, like, a biopic, and there's been Marilyn biopics in various forms before, but like to get like a biopic starring one of our most in demand, uh, easy to watch performers in Ana de Armas, the first Andrew Dominic feature film in 10 years since Killing Them Softly came out in 2012. So yeah, it's really tantalizing prospect. And I think Dominic had to this point had a pretty strong reputation as a more eccentric or you know in inactive filmmaker, basically, where
Mhm.
when he directed 2 episodes of Mindhunter season 2 on Netflix, everyone's like, "Holy shit, this is awesome!"
Mhm.
And then like it comes out he's going to make Blonde, something he'd wanted to do for some time. It's like, oh wow, this sounds really good. And we've been talking about Blonde for a while because like we had known about it for so long with Anna attached, and there's this whole big kerfluffle about it getting an NC-17 rating officially, right? And
Mhm.
to be honest, I seemed kind of overblown. This seemed like it was perfectly fine as a rated R movie to me. Uh, there's nudity, there's some violence, but I don't see how it crossed the line there at all. Seemed a bit performative on Dominic's part. But yeah, I think the issue with Blonde and the reason that it's been getting a very polarized to negative reception is that it is a punishing watch. And, I think Richard Brody described it as Monroe's Passion of the Christ. Like, it is a brutal thing to watch, not fun to watch. And I think most disappointingly, despite some true craft to the filmmaking that you expect from, someone with Dominic's eye, there's just not a lot under the hood of this screenplay. Like, it is really only about showing Marilyn Monroe's trauma, and has like this movie has no other point of view. And not that it has to be historically accurate. I don't care about that. It's not presenting itself as a documentary. That's fine. But it just seems a bit short sighted to only show Marilyn Monroe being brutalized and having a tough time through her career. Like, I just don't really know what the goals of this film were supposed to be. And it came across to me as honestly quite one note. And it's just a really punishing watch, once you get to 2 hours and 40 minutes and it finally ends.
Yeah, it starts right off the bat as brutal. Like the all the stuff with Julianne Nicholson and the abuse of Marilyn as a child, um, is just really, really tough to watch and like unsettling and up and heartbreaking. And from there, you know, the movie like had this big time jump after Marilyn's dropped off at a um state like ward of the she's becomes a ward of the state at a foster home. And the jump is so like big that but you see her like acting in these actor circles, and she's going for a tryout, and you're like, oh, okay, here we go. And immediately she gets raped, right, by a studio executive, and it's just
Yeah.
like within the first like 25 minutes, you see
Goes to
basically, sorry, you
it's
just,
suggesting it's David Zanuck, I think it is. One of the more out in the open casting couch guys at the time.
yeah, yeah, I think it was
Sorry, Daryl Zanuck.
Zanuck,
Sorry.
yeah.
Yeah.
um, but you see a child almost get uh drowned to death and then a rape, and it's just like, this
Yeah.
is this you're in for a ride because there's another 2 hours and 10 minutes to go. So
Doesn't
it's
let up.
already really, really rough. I mean, she is just brutalized by every single man in this, in pretty much every single way, except for I guess Arthur Miller, right? Arthur Miller, Adrian Brody is like the one like sweet person in her life.
Hmm.
Um, I mean,
More
Joe,
or less accurate. Yeah.
your guy Joe DiMaggio, which I think this is actually like kind of based in some
Yeah.
reporting, is pretty terrible in this. Uh,
Yep. I mean, they were only married like
I
less than
think
a
a
year.
year, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I think just overall, it's like a really unsettling movie, and it's even unsettling just in terms of like the time you spend with her on her own, and like even when she's with like Arthur Miller, like the way she like calls all of her like love interest daddy all the
Yeah.
time, and like the way they play up the daddy issues is like so like unsettling. It's really,
Right.
really uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, this is a adaptation of the Joyce Carol
Yeah,
Oates like pseudo
biographical
bio
fiction.
yeah biographical fiction book of like 20 years ago, and giving her like a miss her father complex about her unknown father seemed to have been a creation. And it's like,
Hmm.
I just don't think you weren't serving Marilyn Monroe as a character in this film. She doesn't have any agency,
Yeah.
even when she's not in the act of being abused in some way. You're only showing her at her most, at her lowest, really. And it's just a bit. I think it's just a bit limiting because
Hmm.
Marilyn Monroe, quite famously, was an intelligent person who had thoughts about a lot of stuff, and also was quite direct in dictating her career and what she would let people do to her and stuff like that, especially once her career advanced.
She started her
And
own production company
yeah,
as like a female in the 1960s.
like
Like that's
they
incredible.
barely they don't even like give it any credit, even though it's in the movie. But like, she was studying acting in the heart of New York City. That's how she meets Arthur Miller. Like, she was serious about what she did,
Mhm.
and the movie just doesn't give a shit about that. It just wants to get her to the next time that she gets fucking traumatized. It's just, I just don't like how unintelligent like the storytelling came across, right? And then there's just some really off-putting shit. Like, I don't need like 5 stills of like a baby in the womb. Really abstract shit. And then,
I
like,
hated that.
completely lost me when she's having a conversation with her unborn kid. Like, the movie's point of view on abortion is insane. Whether you are a pro or anti-abortion person, like, the fact that any of that was in the movie at all, I think is ridiculous.
Yeah. It was really tough, and especially like when they show the her having the abortion. Not
Oh
only
my
do
god, yeah.
they like they frame it as she changes her mind at the last second and is forced to go through with it, which in of itself is brutal. But like showing them actually like cutting into the uterus with the scalpel was just like completely like unsettling. Um, and you do get a few moments where you get to see her like having some fun, right? You see her with Cass. Chaplin, Eddie Robinson, and like
Right.
really supposedly her like sexual awakening is what they're kind of
Yeah.
insinuating, and like
Also fabricated completely.
completely fabricated. There is like some record of her having a relationship with Cass Chaplin, briefly, and then apparently like that ended because she was sleeping with his brother, which is actually kind of like a funny story. It would have been
Yeah, that
actually
would have
pretty
been
funny to
better
like
to
see.
see, honestly.
Yeah, but like this like threesome or this triangle is like just totally fictionalized, and then they're kind of played up as like these villains that like are
Mhm.
like trying to exploit their time with her for like money from Joe DiMaggio, which I just thought was like completely like ridiculous. I mean maybe, but like I don't know, it just seemed really out
Right.
there. And then the next time you kind of get to see her like having fun, right, is like maybe on some of the sets where she's like kind of doing her thing, but like the scene where they blow up the skirt, I forgot what movie that's from, but like that's a really just like disgusting portrayal of that, this iconic moment in film, and then they
Right.
kind of have these guys like ogling at her
Yeah.
when she's dressed up in that.
That's true. Billy Wilder made it like an open set, which is
Yeah,
obviously
ridiculous.
would not fly today, obviously.
And then like the next time you see her, it's like she's so traumatized that she's like on set, and I think that's Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, where she's wearing the
Mhm.
pink, right?
Yep.
And she just is like totally losing it, like scratching her face and difficult to work with. And by all accounts, she was difficult to work with. But you go back to like, where is this like a is this supposed to be like a love letter to Marilyn Monroe? Like, or is this supposed to be like, wow, look how horrible her life was? Like, what am I supposed to be taking away from this movie? I don't really know what the messaging is in a lot of this.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, in a sense, it's kind of interesting to think about it as the third and hopefully final version of this kind of like alt biopics we've gotten lately with Pablo Larraín's Spencer and Jackie, of course, about Princess Diana with Kristen Stewart last year, and then a few years back, Jackie Kennedy from Natalie Portman. They're
Hmm.
all kind of similar things, but Blonde just takes it way too much to the extreme, and I think just kind of beats you over the head with ultimately how simplistic its view of the subject matter is as a movie. It's just really disappointing. Really disappointing in Dominic. Like he has not acquitted himself well in the press too, as he's talked about this film while promoting it. Like it just really turns you off. And definitely feel bad for Anna because like I think she does pretty good. You know, there's a whole thing about like the accent and like I think she's quite convincing. And just as a performer, as people know, she's just very she catches the screen. You know, she's a really talented performer, and unfortunately, she just doesn't really have good material in this movie. Not really her fault.
Man, so if you had told me like beginning of the year we were going to be talking about these two movies on the same weekend and we are going to be disappointed by both, I would have been really surprised. And unfortunately,
Yeah,
that's kind of where we're at. Both these totally flopped.
yeah. I mean, I was expecting Blonde to be something. I wasn't expecting it to be similar to Josh Trank's Capone, but
Hmm.
that's what I thought of when I was watching it.
I I wouldn't have put it to that level, but it was definitely
There's more craft behind it from a
yes,
filmmaking
and
perspective.
a better like main performance, I'd say.
Yeah,
But
but
man,
man,
tough, 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 tough.